Okay. Uh, I very rarely post this time of the morning because of all the other people that are doing the same. Alex Jones just finished up or just started, and I don't particularly care to worry about him. Uh, However, David Knight just finished, and I do like his to go up without me trying to interrupt. But then there are lots of others that I concern myself as well. But I have to go. I'm out to do some things today. Hello, everyone, as you come in. It's March 3rd, 2023. Welcome. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I want you to think about some other things. Um, so, this is titled Just a Spiritual Message for Those Who Are Interested. And if you're watching what's happening, the Western powers to show their hypocrisy and their warmongering, led by the United States and NATO, are pushing more and more to arm Ukraine, to assist Ukraine, which is the most corrupt government in Europe. It is the playground for all types of nefarious activities, funding activities, even it looks like some of the situations that we've been encountering over the last 2, 3 years. And they're trying to shift a lot of that blame over to China. Not saying that China isn't involved, but it looks like uh, the Western powers are not going to back off. So this is getting more and more serious all the time. I'm not going to go into the details. And then we have all of the attacks on infrastructure in the United States, particularly food supply types of plants. The actual attack on our air, soil, and water, like we saw in Ohio there just a little bit ago. The attacks on metal processing plants. You know, our lead producing mines and plants were closed by Obama. It's coming up on 8 years ago, not 6 or 8 years ago. 8 years ago, I think. We have to import that lead. So a lot of things are happening. And as I've often said, it looks like, where the United States is at odds with other countries, particularly Russia and China, but in fact, the end target is the American people. And I just want to remind you of that no matter what else is happening. Look at the FBI, what they're doing, what they've done, how corrupt it is, who they kneel to, who they obey, the, the spirit that's in the Department of Justice and in the FBI and even the DOD now, as I've often explained. So what I want to do is I want to bring some get off of that and just bring some spiritual content that I think is very important. There's been a lot of disagreement, a lot of uh, different evidence, supposed evidence brought forth about what the YHWH, who you would know as Jehovah, many people pronounce it that way. A lot of people pronounce it Yahweh. Others, it's just something very much similar, which is probably the case because the Bible talks about the still small voice of God. It isn't, although his appearance will be accompanied by what appears to be thunder and loud noises and quaking and all that. When he speaks to you, it's almost in a whisper. And I just want to tell everybody that there is a video in the description box that I think probably summarizes my understanding of the YHVH in an artistic way that I never thought about doing. I've often told you that the YHVH is a cognate of when God told Moses, "I am." Actually, what that means is I breathe, I exist, and the Yahweh changes it basically to He breathes, He exists. That's essentially what is happening between those two words, but it's basically the same thing. So we address him as he or you exist is what happens when you use Yahweh. Now a lot of people try to say that this is the equivalent of the demigod, I should say, of Gnostic tradition. and other things like that. But there is a lot of, and that it means destroyer because they take it kind of out of context when it also means to exist or to breathe. But at any rate, uh, these these trade-offs in these different spiritual systems often do overlap, and sometimes they're either misunderstood or they're used nefariously, um, and for whatever reason. I just want to put this out there. I'm not going to say much more about it. I will give you some information on a personal experience that I had that I've often talked, well, not often, I've talked about a couple of times. And then I want you to go look at this very wonderful video. Again, I understood this. I talked about the breathings. As a matter of fact, there's a thing called the Egyptian Book of Breathings. The Book of Breathings is an Egyptian thing, and actually it was probably written probably by Hebrews while they were in Egypt, who would have used the Egyptian hieroglyphics, not only their own Hebrew, to get the information out. So at any rate, that gets in a whole nother category. But the point is that Yahweh is the breathing, the the inhale and the exhale, which is exactly what it says. He gives his name actually in Genesis 1:1, or Genesis 1:2, where he says, he formed Adam out of the dust of the ground, then breathed into him his breath, his spirit, the breath of life. And so it shows up right there. And this is very important. And although I've talked about it quite a bit, the idea that he exists or he breathes, or as in Exodus where he tells Moses his name, I am, I exist, I breathe. Those are cognates of each other. It's really the same thing. And I've talked about that before. A lot of you don't want to hear this because you don't have anything to do with spiritual stuff, or you don't want to talk about the principles of Yahweh. I know a lot of people have a real problem with what they consider to be Jewishness. But I got to remind you that what happens in the early, and I know the Judahites and Levites primarily were involved in the redaction by Ezra of the Old Testament. I understand that, but as many people say, certain truths slip through, and I honestly think this is one of them because it has to do with all of mankind. In reality, it's not just one group or one religion or whatever. There's something that we all do. We all do. We all breathe if we're alive. We all breathe. And where we go after here is the same thing. We breathe there. For God is the God of the living, not the dead. With all the trouble that's going on in the world today, I just want you to think about this. I'm not even telling you that you have to believe that the YHWH has anything to do with God. I'm not telling you have to do that. I'm just saying that the evidence of this is worldwide, that everybody does the name, as you'll see in this video, is true. A lot of people say, Roy, why do you talk the way you do? Well, I'm going to bring something up here real quick before I close that I brought up before. My son the other day, as we had that little discussion on Psalms 82, he gave you a couple of his spiritual experiences. One when he was a very young boy, and the second when he was older. And I've talked about a couple of mine. One being, and I'm just going to talk about here. And sometimes I wonder if I should bring this up because I'm not praising myself. When this happened, it was a revelation of the existence of God. Number one. Number two, my association, my relationship to Him. And it wasn't you're a good boy, you're going to be my spokesperson on the earth, you're going to be the new Moses, whatever. No, it was a spanking. He disciplined me as a good father would. He chastised me. Okay? But then he said that he would send angels to have messengers stand by me to protect me from doing, when you're building a fence, if you may make some mistakes building a fence, but unless you get really out of whack, the dad who's telling you to do the fence, build it, isn't going to really interrupt you unless you really screw it up. So these these beings were there to keep me from having too many, uh, not so much errors, because I've made plenty of those, falling short of the mark, and even some evil things. I'll just admit that. But they've kept me from a great amount of harm. They've actually brought me to a place where I can see these things in retrospect and understand that it wasn't a good thing, and that I need to repent. And that's why we don't want to look at evil people and always judge them badly. They deserve it, but at the same time, as I've often said, when you see evil or wrongdoing in somebody else, the best thing to do is to turn around and look to see if those same problems are in you, and then correct them. So that's why we see evil in the world, to look inside ourselves and see if that's in us, and then to ask God to help you to purge it, repent of it. That's the real reason for us seeing evil in the world. Not to say you don't stand against it if they try to harm you or your loved ones or whatever, but the real purpose is that you examine yourself, you cross examine yourself. So, what happened in this situation I had, and I've talked about it before, it's in my autobiography, for instance, kind of veiled there. But yes, I had an experience where, and this is why I really have a lot of respect for people that understand the concept of the man-woman relationship and the concept of a father. You can't have a father unless you have a mother. That's just that's just the way it works, and I don't care what realm you're in. That's the way it is. Some people will try to spiritualize that, but in this situation that happened to me, and it doesn't give me, it's not a commandment that I go out and do, announce this, but just so that you know that it's something on my mind, and it verifies to me what I'm telling you about the YHWH and about the yeah, Asher yeah, which is I am that I am, as most people uh, like to translate it, or I will be whom I will be, which is actually a better one. But the YHWH and that I am that I am are actually cognates of each other. Well, at any rate, so in this situation that I had, as I've talked about before, not that I deserved it. Like I said, it's something I've held on to for years, and I keep it in the forefront. This person that came, this entity that came, did not say they were Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is in office. We're all supposed to take that name upon us and be righteous judges in the world, as I've shown with the name image, with the word image in Genesis, which is Zedem, which is a righteous judgment in the world. Okay, be a righteous judge in the world. That's the image that we're supposed to have, along with what we look like, which is very similar to our very physical structure that attests to our origins. We really, literally are offspring of God, despite the fact that the evolutionists don't like to talk about that. They mock that, but it really is true. So this being came across, didn't say I'm Jesus Christ, nothing like that. You know what he did? And I think I've told you this before. He identified himself, and he identified me with this: my son, my son. Declaring his fatherhood and my sonship. Did I receive a commandment now to go and set the world straight? No, I have a personal responsibility that when I see evil, I have to speak up against it. But if you knew the rest of the visitation, I'm just going to call it that, you would know that it was not an apostleship in the sense that I'm to be an ambassador to the world with this knowledge, or that I'm going to be given some special understanding of things. That was not the promise. The, the promise was basically two things: straighten your ass up. You're playing with things that you shouldn't be. And two, I'm going to protect you, and you'll have the experience that will show you things that you wouldn't have otherwise. And these two that are with me will be there to ensure that that happens until the time when your life here on earth is up. No other promises, nothing. Just and the identification that he is my father and he's identifying me as his son. And I can't give you the emotions and the feelings and the power and the absolute ecstasy of the situation. I can't describe it to you. It's indescribable. But I want to say it because it has to do with the idea of I exist, I breathe. And this video will tell you about every time you take a breath in and breathe out, you are saying the divine name, the name of deity, which is why that name was chosen by God himself. I'll just leave it with that. Got to go about some business today, get some things done. And yes, I'm going to go out tonight. Okay, yes, I am. But I wanted to bring that to you today amidst all of your other searchings and trying to understand what's happening in the world and getting prepared, staying out of the way, and praying that you'll have this beautiful, beautiful rendition in this video in the description box below about what the name YHWH stands for and why you utter it every second of your life here on earth without even knowing it. That's all I got for you. I don't really have time to go through the chat, but I did want to send this out today so that those who have this hunger and this need to know really who they are and where they come from and how they utter the holy name every time they take a breath. And they don't even know. I thought it was beautiful. One of the best artistic explanations of the name that God revealed, the name that God said is his in the Old Testament. It's not a different God. A lot of people said the God of the Old Testament is a different God than the New Testament. It's not. It's the same one, doing different things, but the same. I might cover that a little bit more in some depth sometime in the future, because there's some other clues that the name Jesus Christ is an attribute that you take upon yourself, not so much the name itself. And there's some scholars and biblical teachers that have talked about the parable that Jesus gave of the sheep and the goats. And in that, he doesn't insist. As a matter of fact, in that parable, it says that the people said that they how did they know him? How did they know him? And yet he says what really matters is how you treated the poor and the needy, and the same ideas I've often talked about, that above and beyond anything else, it's piety and righteousness. Loving God even though you may not totally understand him, and you won't. And two, that you treat others as you want to be treated. That's the thing. If you're doing that, you are showing that you have the name of Jesus Christ upon you, even if you've never heard the name. Just like when Father came to me, he didn't say he was Jesus Christ. You might say, well, that means he's the devil. You don't understand. You don't understand office of God. I've shown you all these different things about the offices, and like showing it to Congress, showing Congress being the same as like Elohim, those kinds of things, where you can still have a singular, but you're talking about a council, or all the other things that I've talked about, which I won't waste any more time, okay? That's all I've got for you. Go look at the video in the description box, and maybe give it a like and subscribe, and tell them how much you appreciate what they've done there, because it takes it from the realm of just sermons and explanations and scholarship. It puts it in an artistic form where if you don't cry during that video, I'm not telling you have to, but if it doesn't get to you, and you shed a tear of thankfulness, you need to examine yourself. Well, I'll see you later out here.